You ever think about how just one single idea can, change everything? Well, in the world of literature, it totally happened. We're about to dive into how one guy, William Wordsworth, basically took a sledgehammer to the old stuffy rules of poetry and rebuilt the whole thing, and he did it all based on a pretty radical new idea about feelings.
All right, so let's really look at this. This one sentence, right here. It comes from the introduction to a book of poems called Lyrical Ballads, and it became the mission statement for a whole new movement. It sounds kind of simple, doesn't it? Spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. But back in 1798, this was basically a declaration of war on the entire literary world.
So to really get why this was so huge, you've got to understand what he was up against. This wasn't just, a new style. It was a full-blown poetic revolution.
Okay, so before Wordsworth showed up, the poetry scene was pretty much dominated by this thing called classicism. And you can think of it as poetry that totally valued the head over the heart. It was all about logic, order, and following these super strict rules from ancient Greece and Rome. The language was very formal, very proper. It was all about big ideas for society, not your personal messy feelings.
And then, Lyrical Ballads drops. This collection of poems, which Wordsworth published with his buddy Samuel Taylor Coleridge, was the spark that lit the fuse. It was a total break from everything that came before. I mean, instead of writing about gods and kings, they were writing about shepherds, country life, and, the inner feelings of regular people. This is what really kicks off the Romantic movement in England.
So yeah, the stage is set. We've got our two contenders lined up. This is the ultimate showdown. Old rules versus new feelings. A clash that would completely change the definition of art.
You can really see the difference laid out here. On one side, you've got classicism. It's all about reason, order, society, and super formal language. It's like a fancy black tie gala where you have to behave. And on the other side, you've got Wordsworth's romanticism. It's all about emotion, imagination, the individual, and the language that real people actually use. That's more like an intimate acoustic concert in a coffee shop. Totally different vibe.
Now here's the thing. Wordsworth didn't just write a bunch of new poems and call it a day. Nope, he actually wrote a whole new rule book. That famous preface to Lyrical Ballads was basically his manifesto, where he laid out exactly why poetry had to change and how he was going to do it. And he started by asking some really big questions.
First question on the list, what even is a poet? And notice he didn't ask who is a poet, like he's just listing famous people. He asked, what is a poet? What is their job? What's their purpose? And his answer was, honestly, a game changer. He said a poet isn't some super special genius locked away in an ivory tower. A poet is simply a man speaking to men, just a regular person talking to other regular people. The only real difference, he said, is that a poet has a more lively sensibility, which is just a fancy way of saying they feel things a little more deeply, they notice things more, and they're really good at taking those intense personal feelings and translating them so that everyone can feel them too. It was a totally democratic idea of what an artist could be.
Okay, that makes sense. So, if the poet is just a normal person talking to other normal people, what kind of words should they be using?
Well, Wordsworth's answer here was a direct shot at the old way of doing things. He completely rejected this idea that there was a special, fancy poet language. He was like, no, poets should use the language really used by men. Simple, direct, honest-to-goodness speech. He believed the real power of a poem comes from the raw truth of the feeling itself, not from a bunch of flowery, artificial words that nobody uses in real life. Which, of course, brings us to the biggest question of all, the grand finale. If the poet is a sensitive person and the language is simple, then what is poetry? What is it actually made of?
And this is where we get to the absolute heart of his famous definition. See, for Wordsworth, it's not just about having a big feeling. It's actually a two-step process. You need the emotion, sure, but you also need tranquility.
So here's how it works. Step 1. You have an intense emotional experience. That spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, right? A moment of pure joy or awe or even sadness. But, and this is the absolute key, you don't write the poem right then and there. Step 2 is you wait. You let time pass. You find a moment of calm, of tranquility. Then, step 3, in that quiet moment, you recall the emotion and you shape that memory into a poem. It's the original passion mixed with the wisdom of reflection.
All right, so this all sounds good in theory, but does it actually hold up in practice? Let's put it to the test. We're going to use one of Wordsworth's most famous poems, I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. You probably know it as Daffodils.
So the poem starts out setting the scene. The poet's just walking around, feeling kind of lonely and disconnected. Right away, you get that lively sensibility he was talking about. And then, bam, he stumbles upon this incredible field of daffodils. This is that spontaneous, powerful emotional experience. This is step one.
So let's check the boxes here. Does it fit his own rules? You bet it does. Simple, natural language? Check. A spontaneous, powerful feeling of pure joy? Double check. And then, this is the clincher. Later in the poem, he says that when he's just chilling on his couch in a pensive mood, the memory of the daffodils flashes back to him, and it fills his heart with joy all over again. That is emotion recollected in tranquility. Check! It's the perfect example of his entire philosophy in action.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Wordsworth's revolution was really about making poetry feel human again. He knocked down the walls of all that formal, elitist stuff and said, hey, the most important, profound truths aren't in some old rulebook. They're in simple language, in a beautiful sunset, and in the hearts of regular people. He basically gave poetry back to everyone, making it about what it truly feels like to be alive.
And that really leaves us with a pretty cool thought, doesn't it? Wordsworth's ideas aren't just some dusty old thing from a history book. They're basically an invitation to you. He believed that this potential for poetry is inside all of us, just waiting for that quiet moment of reflection. So it makes you wonder, right? What are the powerful feelings from your own life that could become poetry? What moments of joy or sadness, or just pure wonder, are waiting for you to look back on them and turn them into art?